Thank you for joining us. This is the GrayHair webinar 2021, the year in review, and 2022, the year ahead. My name is Bobby. I'm the Director of Marketing here at GrayHair. I'm sure you've heard me on some of these past webinars. So here's our presenters today. If you're not familiar with him, Angelo Agnostopoulos, he's GrayHair's VP of Postal Affairs. He has over 30 years experience in the postal industry, where he's considered an expert in a wide variety of postal topics and issues. If you don't know, you'll definitely find out today. He's currently involved in many of the major industry groups where he sits on the board of DTAC, MTAC, Postcom, NEPM, and NPPC. So he can clarify some of those if needed. And Adam Collinson is our Director of Address Intelligence. Adam is considered one of the industry's leading experts in address hygiene and data quality services. Adam is currently a leader at MTAC. And he's also an AMI Association rep. And Adam has spoken at every major industry conference, I'd say, for the past 15 or 20 years. He can correct me, but if you've been to a conference, Adam has been there. So after that intro, I'll turn it over to Angelo.
All right, thank you. So one of the things we can do is offer you this deck. There's a lot of slides, and I'm going to go through them kind of quickly. I mean, you can imagine that, this type of material could take at least 5 hours just to go through it in great detail. So what we've done is we've selected just some key items that we wanted to talk about, and then towards the end, talk a little bit about some opportunities and some things to watch out for that you can look forward to in 2022 and beyond. So, of course, the biggest thing that is on people's minds, at least today, is COVID. It's really here to stay. And so what I did was I put a little bit of a list of what the history of COVID looked like. So for those of you that remember, back in January 20 of 2020, the first case was discovered in Washington State, and that was the Alpha variant. Now, in between these variants, there were a couple of minor ones that didn't really hit the US very hard, so I didn't put them in there. But on July 7th, the Delta variant surpassed the Alpha variant as the dominant strain. And so a lot of activity happened around there. The Biden administration reacted. And then we're in the Omicron phase now. And, I said safe bet it's already in the US because I created this deck about 2 days ago. It already appeared in California. There was somebody from South Africa that showed up with the virus. It's really interesting that, we've seen mixed reactions. Now, one of the things I could tell you is this afternoon, the Biden administration is going to have some information around what they're going to do around this. It'll be real interesting. There's going to be some things in there around, providing testing kits for in-home testing for free. They're not going to do lockdowns, but they're going to start to encourage businesses to put in mandates for their employees in that, because of some of the lawsuits that are going on, they can't directly mandate that stuff. As far as this variant, it's a little bit of a weaker variant according to what we're hearing. Most of the cases so far have involved vaccinated people, which again is kind of an interesting thing. I thought I'd throw that out there. We should know in a couple of weeks a little bit more about this variant. And, as I said, there's going to be some announcements this afternoon, including some travel restrictions. I think one of the things that they might say is that anybody, including citizens coming back into this country, have to test and quarantine for 7 days. Why am I mentioning this? Well, what is that going to do to volumes? I mean, if you want to translate that to postal, my personal opinion is I don't think this variant will change mail volumes in 2022. I think, we've seen kind of a stabilization in this new COVID world, and I don't foresee anything happening. Now, that said, between red states and blue states, they're going to react a little bit differently to this. And so we'll have to see what happens if some of the blue states start to enact lockdowns in that. Next slide, please. One of the things that I've been tracking is COVID volumes. The Postal Service puts out this information on a weekly basis. And just to kind of walk you through it, the bars that you're seeing are mail volumes, and I just picked just to show first class mail, pre-sort marketing mail, and parcels. And what the bars show is a comparison between today and last year. And then I also drew a black line, which, is kind of the base 2019 volumes. So you can compare it to, pre-pandemic levels. And as you can see, mail volumes have stabilized. This chart shows between 5/7, 2021, and then the last one that I got mid-November. So we're, in a state of stabilization right now. Marketing mail is looking strong, and you'll see towards the end of the presentation, some opportunities around that. But I think we're in pretty good shape from a COVID volume impact perspective. Next slide, please. All right, so let's start talking. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to switch between talking about timelines of what has happened when for some key major events, and then getting into some detail for some of these items. So the first thing that happened last year was we saw an increase on January 24th, and you could see what the percentage increase was. Of course, the average increase doesn't really match reality for a lot of mailers, because as the Postal Service changes rates, one of the things that they consider is to optimize their revenue. And so some of the larger, higher volume mailers tend to see higher increases, because that's where the volume is, and that's where the Postal Service tries to maximize their revenue. The PRC finally ruled on the 10-year review, which went 14 years, or it went on forever, with the last thing happening in November, which was the appeal process that we were going through in the DC Circuit Court. And they basically said, nope, the PRC does have the authority to grant the Postal Service additional rate authority. And so that's, kind of where we're at right now. I don't foresee that we're going to be going back in the courts and doing anything. So I'm thinking that, unless we see something in legislation, and I'll talk about that in a minute, I think these additional increases are here to stay. The one other big thing that happened with three different deadlines, February, March, and July, was the seamless acceptance mandate. So now, for the most part, everybody's on seamless, and the Postal Service has an automated process to verify mail. And so, there's good and bad there, depending upon what side of the fence you're on. One of the good things is you get early visibility into any problems, and you can correct it. The bad thing, and what held some people back, is that, you don't really have a chance to correct things that are in error, and there's a whole series of assessments that go along with that. Next slide, please. Continuing on, the second release that we saw, which was kind of a first, right? On August 29th, we saw the market dominant products go up by 6.8%, and then anything that was underwater, basically flats and periodicals, saw an extra 2% increase. The reason why I put this on here and why this is important is, we're going to be in a world of constant price changes going forward. And the thing that was of concern around the August increase is it was unbudgeted. People didn't know, to expect this increase when they were working on their budgets back in, August, September of 2020. So that's a little bit of a challenge. And you'll see one of the things that the Postal Service is going to do to kind of help out with budgeting. So we'll talk a little bit about that. The other big thing that's going to have a profound effect on first class mail are the service standard changes, which the Postal Service said, it's really going to take a couple of years to complete. And they're not really providing a lot of detail around the timeline and what's changing when. And so the letter and flat side of it went into effect on October 1st. And, it had some marginal changes, but for the most part, they wanted to kind of hold things because of peak and not make a lot of major changes. And they, said for the first class parcels, they weren't going to do anything until 2022. I think a little bit of that was because of some of the feedback they got back from the OIG when they gave them an opinion on that. Here it shows, what the Postal Service thinks they're going to lose in volume. I think that that number is way low. I think that number is going to be much higher. So we're going to start to see over time a much bigger decrease in first class mail volume. One of the other things is the Postal Service did a reduction in force as they did their network realignment, and they rearranged their management. And that was mostly complete in October. There's still a couple of other ones that were announced after that. And I'll talk a little bit about why that's important and what the ramifications of that are. CAPS to EPS migration is complete for the most part. I think there's about 1,900 and something accounts left, and I think almost all of those are express mail accounts. And so the Postal Service is pretty close to shutting down the old CAPS system and being on a more modern platform. The other thing, and this is part of this kind of perpetual, we're going to be in, price increases, decreases, multiple times a year, is again for 2021, the Postal Service announced the parcel peak surcharge that went into effect on October 3rd and ends on December 25th. The interesting thing is the parcel folks then January 9th have another increase. So I mean, these things are on, off, and so we're constantly doing that. Part of the problem with all of these price changes, and especially on the market dominance side, is we can have multiple mail DAT file updates and mail XML updates a year, and you're always working on some type of a price change. So the software vendors and providers out there have to allocate a lot more resources to handling these price changes. And then even from an end user perspective, a lot of people are going to have to do a lot more testing. So it's really going to take a lot more time and effort to get this stuff implemented. And we'll have to see how that goes. I mean, you look at the January 9th increase that's coming up. There's still questions even today, and a whole list of questions that the software providers are waiting to get answers on. And so that's a problem, right? Because it's, less time to work all this stuff out, get code in place, get it tested, get it to customers, and then having them go through their test cycles, which, often requires at least a month. So this stuff's going to be really, really squeezed. The Postal Service said that, in a lot of announcements that they're ready for peak season. We're already seeing a few issues, and we'll talk about that in a minute. And legislation, I think it's pretty much dead for the rest of the year. The House and the Senate are way busy with other much more important things. And so from what I'm hearing from the Hill, that any type of legislation for this year is on the way back burner. So that's not going to happen for a while. Next slide, please. All right, so the other big thing is the Delivering for America plan that the Postal Service announced on March 23rd, which is now affectionately referred to as the DFA. Here's a link. I encourage everybody that hasn't read it to go through and read it. Next slide, please. And so this from the plan are some of the things that the Postal Service wants to do. We've highlighted some key things there, like the Postal Service announcing that they want to do 6- and 7-day delivery for mail and packages. Good thing. The other thing they want to do is they want to have 95% on-time service standards. And according to the Postmaster General, he said he wants to be in the low 90s next year. And then by 2023, he wants to get to 95%. And so, that'll be a good thing. We'll have to see how that all shakes out. The Postal Service thinks that they're going to generate 24 billion in new revenue, but they're going to spend 40 billion to get to that. So, there's some things there. We have to see what's going to happen. There's things around congressional support, best in class, and some of these things, I don't know if they're aspirational or we need some more details, like best in class mail and package processing and delivery operations. I think we need some detail around that to understand what that really means. The other thing, like post offices as go-to destinations, I think we need some more information around that. A fully optimized surface and transportation network, that's a biggie, and that's coming up. Um, stable and empowered workforce, we'll have to see what happens with that. Um, Legislative, they want legislative relief. I think we all want legislative relief. And then the last one, which is one of the more controversial ones, is this judicious implementation of new and existing pricing authority. And so, when I see this, one of the things I think about is, this comment around, a free discourse of ideas generates even better ideas. Well, what do I mean by that? I mean that, we weren't really involved in creating this plan. I think if industry was a little bit more involved in that, I don't know that it would have looked significantly different, but there would have been probably some better ideas generated. Next slide, please. And so part of the plan, the Postal Service said, if they didn't put it in place, they were going to lose $160 billion. You could see the chart here. Next slide. But in reality, the Postal Service is making a lot more money than they predicted, mostly due to parcel volumes. So, what's in the plan is already completely out of date. And as you can see, here the Postal Service is making pretty decent revenue in 2021, although the latest numbers that they're putting out is showing a little bit of a slowdown in revenue. So we'll have to see what happens there. And then you can see on the right chart, you could see the mail volumes, which haven't substantially declined. Next slide, please. And so one of the things that you could see here is a history of mail volume dating back all the way to 1926. In 21, the Postal Service did lose 1.9 billion pieces. A lot of that was in first class mail. And mail volume is down 40% since 2006, when the last time the Postal Service was in the black. And parcel volumes are up. I think this is one of the reasons. I think when the Postal Service sees this, this is where they come up to saying that our future is in parcels, because they're seeing the volumes go down, and they think that they need to create some better opportunities elsewhere. And so that's one of the more contentious things of the plan. Next slide, please. And so one of the things that was, I don't know necessarily part of the plan, but part of what the Postmaster General wanted to do was they wanted to rearrange their network based on being a lot more efficient. So the logistics and processing operations were broken up into two regions. Next. And these are the different districts, and that's really part of what drove some of the reorganization in the Postal Service, because they had less managers that they needed, because they've kind of redone their network. And then next. And then what they've done is they've broken out the logistics and processing from the retail. And so these are the retail and delivery operations and the different areas that are responsible for all of this. Next. As part of all of this, what they did was they expanded the Surface Transfer Center network. And these facilities you could think of as cross-dock facilities. They were initially primarily built for first class, because a lot of the air stuff is going to ground. But also, a lot of other cross-dock pallets are going to be going through these facilities. And these are some of the stats around that. Next. Part of the changes is they wanted to change the first class service standards. As I said, they wanted to get things out of air because there's so many more touch points, and they wanted to move more of that to ground. And so you can see a picture of, before and after what they're trying to do. In addition to that, what they're trying to do is take out the NDC network and just use it just strictly for parcels. And so we'll have to see what happens there. Next. And in first class, what they're trying to do is add a couple of days to delivery for some parts of the country. So, in some parts of the country, what was a 3-day standard is now going to be a 5-day standard. And that's part of the effort to try to get to 95% on time. Next. And so here's an example of what it looks like if you were mailing from Chicago to the rest of the country versus what it looks like under the new plan. And as you can see, the corners of the country are at 5 days, and a lot of the country went to 4 days. And so we'll have to see as this unfolds and as more and more of the volume gets off of air and goes onto ground. We'll have to see. The Postal Service stated that 49% of the volume will be affected, and because it'll be moving to ground. We'll have to see what it looks like. I think it's important to pay very close attention to this, because there are a lot of people in regulated industries that have laws that govern or mail delivery for anything that they're sending out. And so we'll have to see what happens here. Next. And so I'll pass this over to Adam to just talk real quickly about some of the effects around some of the first class changes that the Postal Service has.
Yeah, I pulled this information together. This is the USPS does report information out on performance, on their score, and how they're doing. And so I actually just went ahead and pulled from Q1 last year and Q1 year to date, so far this year, because obviously we're just into Q1 for this particular year. And the key thing you see is originally everything was pretty much overnight, 2-day, and 3-day. And you can see the distribution of the volumes. And a key thing here is, the target scores were all in the 90% and up. And as far as on-time processing, the only score in the 90% was in overnight. Now, remember, those first columns, that's for all of Q1 2021. So that was through all of peak. And we know, all the issues that started in peak. Some of it started in November, but it really got being impacting come mid-December. So that's why you're kind of seeing all those low processing on-time scores. And remember, while peak officially runs through, the end of December, last year, the issues that were seen from peak lasted pretty much all the way through Q2 of the year, as far as seeing some of the impacts. And obviously the biggest thing that came from that was because of staffing issues, things related to the pandemic and those related issues. But also these scores are also a little bit filtered. They're not showing the full end-to-end effect that mailers were seeing. This is only what the USPS was reporting once they were able to intake the volume and process it. Now, when you look at the second set of columns, the gray columns for 2022, you kind of see the effect. Overnight percentage is what's in overnight hasn't really changed, which is in line with what they had. When they redid the delivery times, the range for 2-day essentially got cut in half. And yeah, so about half of the volume now is in 2-day that used to be, and the rest shifted to 3-day. And you can see the amount that officially shifted to both 4 and 5-day delivery windows. And so that's the thing that mailers now need to account for in their processes. They have an expectation of how long it's going to take for the mail to get delivered, and mailers are going to have to adjust for that. But also, you can kind of see the target scoring has dropped way down. And this was, again, kind of related to what happened and to all the changes. And as Angelo said, the intention is to change those target scores over time, and they want to get to where everything has a target score of 95%. And hopefully, have the system to where the key thing is the actual performance matches expectation. So that's kind of the big thing with this is they're looking at improving service performance, but you and I hear service performance, you think, okay, delivery is going to be faster, it's going to be less expensive, and it's going to be very reliable. Okay, well, that's not what it means here. When the USPS is talking about service performance, service is flat out being slowing down. That's been fully documented. They're changing how delivery is happening, how everything is being transported, and that is going to generate savings for the Postal Service. But the goal that we'll see as mailers is that it should be more predictable. So it might be taking longer, but hopefully it'll be more predictable. And so far, the current processing on-time scores for this quarter are reflecting that. You can see all but one of the values is in the 90%, but we're just starting to get into peak. So we got to see what's going to happen through the rest of this quarter. And I'll hand it back to Angelo.
All right, next slide. All right, so one of the things that the Postal Service, and this is a little bit of insider information here, is they're trying to get their scores up to achieve some of the goals, like I said, that the Postmaster General put out there for 2022 and 2023. And so we're seeing some new initiatives where some of the plants are calling the mail service providers around issues that they're seeing, trying to make sure that they're keeping their scores up. We're seeing some people getting questioned around when mail was entered versus what's in EDOC to making sure that their scores are up. Some of the people in U.S. operations, because there's a lot of new people in some of these new positions, aren't really clear that there's some tolerances there, from a seamless perspective in that, and they're looking at this from a kind of a zero tolerance perspective. And so, we're working through that. The service providers are working through that with postal operations. And in some cases, in order to be more efficient in some of the postal operations, they're asking service providers to make even more breakouts or doing things, that are maybe a little bit outside of DMM rules to try to help them better process their mail. And some of the acceptance people are new to their jobs, and they're not as knowledgeable as some of the people that they've replaced around some of the rules and all that. So I put this slide in here just for everybody to just kind of watch out, because there are efforts trying to get the scores improved. And so if you haven't been contacted, you might be, and that's really what's behind it, is the Postal Service is just trying to get their data accurate, making sure that mail is good, and trying to get their scores up. Next. And so in peak season, one of the problems that's happening is hiring. And this gets to the first slide, right? COVID and some of the issues around that. The Postal Service still has some hiring issues. They did start a lot earlier, which put them ahead of a lot of the competition. I mean, even like FedEx announced hiring problems. We'll have to see this year. FedEx and UPS could be dumping some parcels to the Postal Service if they can't handle that type of volume. And we know what happened last year. Down at the bottom right, you could just see, I just threw that in there because I thought it was kind of interesting to see how the Postal Service ranks as an employer, because the Postal Service had about a 50% turnover rate, and they're doing a lot of things trying to improve that. And I think a lot of that has to do with some of the feedback that they were getting that was published out there. Some of the issues that we're seeing already in peak, MTE, especially in the Midwest, a lot of people are having problems getting pallets and getting other types of MTE. It's improving. The Postal Service is listening, but there's still a lot of MTE out on the West Coast that's coming through rail, and there's still a lot of orders that haven't come in, and so that's still a bit of a problem. One of the other things we're seeing is slowdown in the NDC networks. Anything that's getting dropped in there is taking longer to deliver. And it could be that some of that stuff is going through the STC network, taking an additional hop and taking longer to deliver. So anybody that's dropping to the NDC, I'd watch that stuff very closely, because it looks like it's starting to take a little bit longer to deliver. Next. And so I put a couple of things in here just for reference. You could see the URL at the bottom. The OIG did a report. It was just recently announced on the Postal Service, and they talk a little bit about how many people they've hired and how many additional processing plants there are. I encourage you to go read that. I think it's some really good information. Next. One of the things, and Adam was talking a little bit about it, is I thought I'd throw it out here so that, we could see what happened last year. And as you could see, during peak season, you could see service performance drop dramatically. I personally don't think we're going to see the same thing this year, but we'll have to, again, keep an eye out of what's happening. But this was a picture of what happened last year. Next.
And just to add a quick comment on that, the other thing is a lot of this, what we're showing is national. So it's the, if you will, the averaged out. And so even with performance numbers you're seeing right now, which look so good, when you look at specific areas, there are specific areas where the numbers are nowhere near as good as what's being reported, but it's just kind of being, averaged out when you look at a national level. So it is important to be aware of what's happening with your specific mail volume going to specific areas of the country to know where you do and do not have issues.
Yeah, I mean, if you look, yeah, you got a good point, Adam. I mean, if you look at Ohio and some of the Northeast, and there's some areas that are having much more significant issues. Last year, these were the top facilities that had issues, and you could see that they persisted, to February. And I mean, everybody remembers Cleveland and the trucks sitting out there for days trying to get in, and some of these other areas that we saw some issues in. Next. So this year, the Postal Service is doing a lot more around peak season and around communications. One of the things that they're doing is they're putting out a weekly service performance report. And so what I did was I took one of the last ones and I just grabbed the beginning of it just to give you an idea. They give you a lot of really good information about, where they see service performance, the type of volumes that they're expecting to see, and where they're seeing. Now, the one thing about service performance, especially for first class mail, is um, they've changed the standard as of October 1. So you might look at the numbers and it looks like service performance has gone up, but it's not. It's really just a matter of they kind of moved the goalposts and the numbers are looking better. I mean, they're not at 95%, but we'll have to see. And so I encourage you, if you haven't signed up for that, to make sure that you do. Next. The other thing that they're doing is they're holding webinars on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, and they're presenting this type of information, as you can see on the screen, for where there's areas, where there's weather, and other things. So I encourage you to do that. I think one of the more disappointing things from an industry perspective is that this is done in a webinar format, and there's very little interaction with the folks. I mean, you can put things in Q&A and in the chat, and you can communicate back to the Postal Service that way, but this isn't really a two-way conversation for the most part. Next. The other thing is the Postal Service is way behind schedule, but they should have had this Industry Connect dashboard. So I don't know, Adam, if you could spend a couple of seconds talking about that.
Yeah, and this is a dashboard that the USPS has been putting together, and the industry requested it. This is Rev 1, and it's currently under review by some folks in the industry, specifically industry MTAC leaders. And what it is in Rev 1, it is a instantaneous snapshot of what's going on to identify where are their facilities having issues or at certain levels of having an issue, to where kind of to give a heads up of where are their problems, do things need to be taking action, not only from the post office's view, but also from a mailer's view as far as when they're about to be impacted. So it's being reviewed. Recommendations are being made for a Rev 2.0 of this, of how it could be of more use to the mailing industry. But hopefully this will be coming available soon, to where everybody can go out and be watching to see, at least on a snapshot, where right at this moment are there issues with USPS facilities.
And the one thing to add to that, again, this is really based off of, because I asked the Postal Service this directly, this is based off of service performance measurement data, which means this isn't all of the volume. This is just the clean, more pristine volume that has a good start and stop the clock, and that's really not representative of all of the volume in the system, but a good majority of it. Next slide. So let's talk a little bit about timeline for next year and beyond. So we're looking at another increase in January on the 9th, I believe. And this one's going to be for competitive products. The next market dominant one is going to be in July. And so after that, starting in 2023, we're going to be seeing increases twice a year. and we'll have to see what happens. I mentioned earlier around some of the issues with software vendors and just kind of being in this perpetual, price increase mode. There's a couple of other things like periodical pending calculation changes and bound printed matter moving to competitive and some of these other things that we're still waiting for approval from the PRC on. So we'll have to see, when those go into effect. We'll have to see if they go into effect with the other stuff in January or whether that's going to happen a little bit later. The promotions have been approved for 2022. We're going to talk a little bit about informed delivery at the end, but there's a lot of opportunity with promotions, I think, especially in 2022. Talked already about legislation being a possibility maybe for early next year. And then Adam's going to talk a little bit about addressing and CAS and that at the end, and some opportunities and some things to watch out for there. Next. Now, as I said, beginning in January of 2023, we're going to see twice a year increases for the market dominant products. And, in the July one, there's going to be about 10 months of CPI within that. And we'll have to see, after that, there's going to be kind of 6 months CPI baked into, starting in 2023. So we'll have to see what happens there. As I said before, will have a huge impact on budgets. Now let's go to the next slide and we'll talk about what the Postal Service is doing to do that. So the Postal Service is putting out some information so that you could do some forecasting and plan budgets. So this is a slide that shows where they think CPI is going to be when they file for the next market dominant price increase. Next slide. And so they tried to explain the formulas and all the computations that they're doing in order to figure that out, or what goes into figuring out what the next price increase is going to be. And basically what this is saying is in next July, we're looking at about a 6% increase. Now, depending upon how the economy is going, because, part of this is CPI, it could be much higher than that, depending upon what happens in the next couple of months with inflation. So, you could bet on at least a 6% increase. And then if you're in one of the underwater categories, another 2%. So for budgeting purposes, you should be probably banking on at least 8% increase in July. So we'll have to see what happens as we get closer to that, but that's what it's looking like right now. Next. And here's a list of some of the other things that the Postal Service is doing. Some of the things that they're doing, just to kind of paraphrase what's happening here is the Postal Service really wants, flats as close to the delivery unit as possible. That's one of the things that they're doing is they're shutting down some of the FSS machines. They want a lot of pallets that are cross-dockable down to the facility that's going to actually break them down and putting them on machines to sort them for delivery sequence. So there's going to be incentives and things around trying to get that to happen. But these are some of the things that the Postal Service is considering for some of the next price changes. Again, all of this subject to Board of Governors approval. Next. Some of the other things that the Postal Service is doing and things that could affect the mailing and shipping industries is this redesign of the logistics and delivery networks. And as I said, it's on pause until the end of peak. It's going to take a couple of years to complete. There's service standard changes. There's kind of the expansion of the Service Transfer Center, which are now standalone facilities managed by non-postal people. And then some of these products we'll have to keep an eye on that the Postal Service has, like this USPS Connect Local, which is a parcel offering where you could drop things at a local SCF or a local delivery unit for same day or next day delivery. They also announced a local mail option, which has to have PRC approval. It's a market test. The idea being is if you have a letter and you want it delivered same day or next day, you can pay them, and I think it's just it's around $3, but you have to take it to the local delivery unit in order for that to happen. To me, it looks like they're trying to compete with the bike messengers out there. I don't really know how much use this will get, if any. We'll have to see what happens. They did also put in place a banking pilot. And just to give you an example, one of the sites that they put was in Brooklyn, and I think to date they've gotten 0 takers on that because of the thresholds being so low. I think you can only get up to $500. You can only cash up to $500 a check to get a debit card that you can use. And then Plus One became a permanent product, and so that's going to be going into effect in January as well. The other thing that's going to cause a lot of consternation and could result in a lot of parcel volume decline, in addition to the price increase that's happening in January, the Postal Service is instituting a couple of additional fees that they're putting in place. And so you're seeing a lot of communication now to the PRC and the Postal Service saying there's really not enough time to implement this stuff by January 9th. And so we really need more time. And so we'll have to see if the Postal Service delays that beyond that. But again, there's some more fees here. And that's, again, a disincentive for parcel shippers to tender some of that volume to the Postal Service. So we'll have to see what that looks like as far as parcel volume going forward once some of these things go into effect. Next. This is a slide that shows some of the things that the Postal Service is working on. And so a lot of what they're working on is around product visibility. And, again, this is part of their parcel effort, trying to improve the way that they're providing visibility for parcels. Informed delivery, big one. It's, that's something that they're focusing on. Pricing and revenue assurance. They're trying to make sure you're paying for what you use and you're taking mail to the right place. And so they're putting in a lot of stuff into there. They're trying to upgrade their delivery systems and their logistics systems, and they're getting much deeper into APIs to allow for better computer-to-computer communication with the Postal Service. Next. And so one of the other things, and this is more for the mail service providers and the logistics companies out there, is the Postal Service is currently running a test in Denver and Phoenix where industry is passing them breadcrumbs. The Postal Service has created a dashboard here. The nice thing about this is that if you participate in this pilot and the Postal Service knows you're showing up to their dock, they could tell you what dock door to go to and they can unload you immediately. So for providing information to the Postal Service, you can get some benefits from being able to be part of this, and you can give them visibility into what's coming in their door to make sure you get expedited delivery. So here's an opportunity where you can participate, help the Postal Service out, and they'll help you out. I think this is one of these good things, and it's starting to look good, and hopefully we'll see it expanded and more people signing up for it. Next. Let's talk a little bit about informed delivery, and I'm going to go through this kind of quickly so we have some time for questions. You could see, from an informed delivery perspective, the numbers keep going up. It's becoming more popular. In the promotions for next year, they're extending the period for the promotion from 3 to 5 months, and they're doubling the discount to 4%. So if you don't have technology in place to deal with this, you better. And if you're a mail owner and you're not participating, I bet you, especially if you were on the fence, you're going to participate. I mean, that's a pretty decent discount for a long period of time for, a minimal amount of work and a minimal amount of investment in order to participate in this. Next. Here's the saturation across the country, and you could see that there's some parts of the country that they have really, really good saturation. Next. One of the things I wanted to throw in here was one of the early statistics that was put out there when informed delivery first started and what the makeup was of people that had signed up for it. And if you look at one of the earlier studies, 56% of the people that had signed up for were male. And as you can see from like 25 to 65, it was pretty evenly distributed. as far as the number of people that were signing up. Of course, the 18 to 24s, they don't get a lot of mail, so I could see why they wouldn't do it. Now let's flip the slides and let's see what it looks like more recently. And if you look at it more recently, you could see that it now represents 60% female. And you could see that, you know, the 65 plus category for age is at 39%. So you could see that there's kind of a shift in the demographics of people that are signing up for informed delivery. And so that, you know, presents, I think, some opportunities here for folks to look at that, compare it to the previous chart, and see where things are going. And you can see, I think one of the reasons why, you know, maybe, you know, female numbers are going up is, you know, some of the campaigns that were out there were more geared towards females. I think Michael's was one of the bigger users, and you know, there's a variety of different reasons for that, but I think it was kind of an interesting statistic to show you. Next. Some other things to watch out for, and these are just some kind of bigger things to look for. International e-commerce grew at a 15% rate compared to the Postal Service, which grew at a 25 to 40% rate. So e-commerce growth as compared to the world is much bigger in this country. Amazon finally surpassed FedEx for number of parcels delivered. I thought that was pretty interesting. Walmart is now doing home deliveries. So again, there's a competing network. So there's another truck that's going to be coming by your house every day. And the thing that I'm a little bit concerned about is this big move by transactional mailers to digital, especially because of the service standard changes and some of the increases in prices. And the USPS reduction in force, the thing there is, you know, there's a lot of people in new jobs with little knowledge and experience. And so they're trying to come up to speed real quickly. And so that's something we're going to have to watch out for. Next. Now, there are some bright spots out there. You know, I pulled this chart that shows an increase in credit card solicitations. And so you can see that, you know, solicitations for credit cards have gone up dramatically during the pandemic. I saw another thing this morning that said 27% of the population has signed up for a new credit card, I think, in the last year. 27%, that's a big number. And so it looks like people are starting to use more credit and doing some things. So, you know, marketing mail, I think, is going to be pretty strong, especially in the financial industries. And I think in others as well, but I just threw that out there, you know, for people to say, watch out for these kinds of things to see where there's opportunities. Next. And so one of the other things, and I didn't put the URL on here, but the OIG puts out some interesting statistics, and this is really a chart showing things that can impact the Postal Service's model. You could see things like 5G networks. Well, you know, I thought to myself, well, why would that be there? What that does is it allows rural people access to the internet, which, you know, will have an effect on diversion to digital from paper. Things like AI and ML, machine learning and artificial intelligence and all that, that's going to have both a positive and a negative effect. The negative effect is, you know, people could divert other people to digital based on preferences. The other thing that it can do is it can have people mail smarter and more targeted mailings to people. And so blockchain, I mean, there's all this other technology out here that people need to keep an eye on to see, you know, what the impact is. You know, things that have low impact are things like 3D printing, but you got to watch out some of these Internet of Things and some of these other things that have higher impacts. Next. All right, Adam, if you can go through these slides.
Yeah, so I wanted to present a little bit of information of what we've been seeing as far as not just undeliverable mail, but what's been happening with the mail that isn't necessarily pristine, but what's been going on, you know, the good and the bad, and what's changing that mailers can start planning for and need to start thinking about. First off, just overall undeliverable mail as reported by the post office. So this is just the volume that they end up seeing and being able to record. The first part is kind of a weirdly good number is that as far as percentage of marketing mail that is undeliverable, that number does continue to come down, but it's still at 4.5%. So that's 4.5% of the marketing mail does not end up getting delivered to an individual. So it's ending up being treated, basically treated as waste. We know that number is low because that requires the mail to be brought back to the postal facility, be scanned, recorded, and tracked. Whereas if it's not identified to get that service, the carriers are allowed to just drop those pieces right in the wastebasket. So we know in reality that number is a little bit higher, but as far as what the USPS is seeing, that number is coming down. First class mail, unfortunately, it's just bad and bad. The percentage and the volume both continue to climb. Now, the fact that the volume is climbing is really concerning since we know that total first class mail volume is on the decline. Yet the volume that ends up being undeliverable actually has been increasing. The latest numbers is it's 2.82% from 2020. It's 1.49 billion pieces. One thing that's kind of interesting, if you look back at the USPS's numbers, in 2008, the percentage of first class mail that was undeliverable was at like 1.49. So we have almost twice the rate of undeliverable first class mail now than we did back in 2008. So what's the reason for that? What's causing that? What maybe can be changed to help that? That's where we go to what's next on the slide. And one of the things that I've been excited about, go back to the prior slide. One of the big things was the USPS enabled their mobile devices to allow the carriers to enter move left no address and PO box closed. So this is when a person is moved but did not file a change of address with the Postal Service. So the carriers are able to figure this out. And we've done analysis over the year, identifying with pieces that were undeliverable, okay, is the reason the code given accurate? And checking the consistency of that codes over time. And that's when one of the industry concerns is, well, we're not taking action on these because we don't trust these codes, because we see they're not consistent. One of the things that we identified was, well, it looks like a lot of these should originally been flagged as a move left no address, but that process is actually very cumbersome. So this tool allowed the elimination of a lot of that cumbersome process. And so the USPS reported they saw an uptick in the filing of the MLNAs. I did an analysis looking at the first part of this year as it was just starting to roll out to the last part of this year. And I've seen a 33% increase in the number of MLNA notices and a 10% increase in box closed no orders. And so these are then recorded in the system. It'll get into a link. Mailers can be getting this information and taking action. Interestingly, we also saw a significant drop in temporary aways, but this is an effect from the pandemic. If you remember, when the pandemic hit, starting in March and April especially, a lot of businesses started closing their doors, sending everybody to work from home. And so then they also filed temporary change of addresses to redirect their mail. Well, when you do that, you can initially file for 6 months, and then you can file for a second 6 months, which basically put everybody through the end of February of this year. At that point, you can't refile a temporary way, so you have to change it either to permanent or not. Well, that time frame, yeah, so we saw the temporary ways go way down. We did see a spike in business permanent COAs, and now things seem to be evening out a little bit more. One of the things that's kind of concerning me has been the increase in the amount that's being identified and returned as insufficient as addressed and no such street. So your first thought is, oh, mailers are sending out more bad mail. Well, that is one of the potential explanations, but there's another explanation, and Angelo has alluded to it. The USPS has had a lot of turnover. So you have new people doing more delivery, doing more operations. You've lost postal knowledge, you've lost experience, you've lost information. Also, they're still having staffing issues where, okay, they don't have as much time to try and figure out what is the correct address to figure out the delivery. So I think that's been a factor as well, that it's an issue of not, it's just the mail that had issues before that the USPS was able to figure out. Now they're not having the knowledge and time to figure out and make that mail deliverable. So that's where there's an opportunity for mailers to really look at this and identify how can I make this mail better? And where are some of the opportunities? And that's some of what there definitely is a chance to work on. Next slide. I wanted to show you, not just the Postal Service's view, but when you actually look at this from a true everything, what's going on, and accounting for all the volume, you actually see the numbers are different, especially with the marketing pieces. Now, the operational mail, that's your first class mail. If it's undeliverable, the USPS brings it back, processes it. So not surprising, when we look at it across our clients and across the industry, our average percentage matches what the USPS is reporting. For marketing mail, we know that a lot of it doesn't get caught and identified by the USPS. And we've actually identified that there's a significant difference between marketing mail to consumers and marketing mail to small and medium businesses. Small and medium businesses, the amount that's undeliverable is significantly higher. But across the board, there is opportunities to utilize the data, install best practices to identify what mail really is and is not deliverable, not just what qualifies for postage discount, but what actually is going to be deliverable and not. And so you can get the percentages down significantly, resulting in significant savings just from not being able to produce those pieces, but also having a lot more business impact and value as far as impacting revenue flow, customer satisfaction, response rates, et cetera. And a lot of what's going on with Cycle O is the USPS has data, additional information that they're going to make available to the mailing industry so that mailers can make smarter decisions on what should be mailed, what shouldn't be mailed, how to make adjustments to make better decisions. Some of those things and that information is available now, maybe not the most easy to get advantage of, but there are things that mailers can take advantage of now to start seeing some of the benefits. Next slide. As a highlight, Cass Cycle O, this would be a presentation in and of itself to go through everything. Real quickly, Cass is overall, when you drop in the new version, there will be fewer records that qualify for postage discounts, but this is actually a good thing because those pieces that no longer qualify for discounts are pieces that actually are completely undeliverable today. You should never be mailing, you don't want to be mailing these pieces. So this will be an additional flag to kind of tell you, hey, don't mail these. A good thing is with one of the changes, a lot more addresses are going to be eligible to sign up for informed delivery. So those counts of who signed up today, we should be able to see a nice spike happening once the new Cass cycle is out. There's some also issues where right now you'll have an address that will indicate it's in a different state from when it actually is physically located. That's going to be addressed, and highlighted right in the middle. There's a lot more data points to tell you information about a particular address, including identifying not just ones that are at a higher risk of being undeliverable, but that also have a high risk of potential fraud issues, dealing with the type of address and or what all goes on with delivery. But also to help you, many industries, healthcare, financial, have industry-specific regulations around addresses, which ones they can use, can't use in certain circumstances. It'll be easier to identify those. So to help you keep compliant with your industry-specific regulations. And overall, just making sure you're getting the right address for what you need to do. Is this where a person lives where I needed to deliver something? Is this where I needed to send packages to? Is this where they receive mail? Because you could actually have a person that literally has 3 different addresses, one for each one of those. Okay, so it's finding the one that's the right opportunity. And
Adam, I think we're at time.
Yeah, we're at time. The next slides, the slides are going to be sent out. The next slide just shows you two real quick examples of some of the opportunities that how you could utilize some of this new data to save money and, for example, offset the rate increases.